can kick off. Thank you. You're very welcome to this short webinar this morning. I'm Denise Hayward, Chief Executive of Volunteer Now, and I'm delighted to welcome Gethin Williams, who's an Associate Consultant with NCVO, who's going to be talking us through the opportunities presented to us by the Big Help Out, which is fast approaching. The time I kept thinking, June was going to be ages away, but now it's really not ages away. We're really looking forward to hearing from Gethin this morning, and hopefully this will be quite an informal session. He'll be doing a little presentation, and there'll be loads of opportunities for discussion and questions as we go. So without further ado, we'll just pass over to Gethin. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Denise, and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for being here. As Denise said, I'm an associate consultant with NCVO. I'm sure you know who NCVO are. They're the membership organisation for charities in England. They're one of the partners connected to delivering the Big Help Out this year. And my role is to support voluntary organisations to get involved in the campaign, which mostly involves kind of explaining what it is and kind of how it works, and talking you through some of the aspects of how to make the most of it, essentially, in your volunteer recruitment plans. That's the ultimate goal here. So this morning's session is sort of built around that. We've got quite a nice compact group here, actually, which is quite helpful because it lends itself to what Denise was saying. We can stop and start and talk about any aspects as we go. I've prepared a bit of a structure for us, but we can focus on the elements that are probably most interesting or kind of useful to you. We can do either of those, really. If we feel we've got time, I don't know if people do want to do a quick round of introductions. If there's anything that you came here really hoping for or expecting that you want to sort of flag now, do tell us. And then I'll try and build that in or focus on that or make sure that we particularly address that. Perhaps we could do that if that's
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely fine. I just didn't know if you wanted to do that. Sometimes we don't when there's a bigger group, but we're very happy to.
No,
I'll just call out people as they're on my screen if that's okay, and then
perfect.
people can crack on. So Andrew, you're up top left if you want to.
Yes, hi everyone. My name's Andrew, and I'm Research and Information Officer at Volunteer Now.
Thank you. Emma, you're next.
Yes, I work for a company. We provide governance in schools. So a big part of my role this next year is going to be in terms of recruiting volunteer governors.
Thank you. Garth.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm Garth Arnold. I'm involved with Rotary. I'm based here in Northern Ireland, and I was part of the board, chair of the board last year across from in Rotary GBNI.
Thank you. Jane. Oh, sorry, you're mid coffee. Sorry about that. Not really. Sorry about that. I should have passed over you discreetly. Go on ahead.
That's fine. Jane Robb, I'm part of the organising group for Repair Cafe Whitehead.
Brilliant. Thank
and
you.
I'm not, yes, I'm here because I'm interested.
Lovely.
And because we have volunteers and because we want more volunteers.
Lovely. Perfect. I think this could be a good opportunity for you. Kiva.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Kiwi. I work for Mary's Meals, and it's, I suppose, volunteers for us are like the heart of everything, you know, because there's only one me. So yeah, really interested to find out more.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Kiwi.
Lovely. Jamie.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm Jamie. I'm a volunteer support officer with Volunteer Now on Jane's community engagement team. I've been working across Volunteer Now and Be Collective over the last few years, and Be Collective actually got on board with Do It for the whole Big Help Out thing. So I kind of have an interest there to kind of marry that up a bit more and learn more about that.
Thanks very much. Paula, welcome. Nice to see you.
Good morning. How are you all? I'm Paula Marshall. I'm the volunteer manager in the Northern Health and Social Care Trust. And yeah, hoping to learn lots from you all today.
Grant, thank you. Jane.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Jane Gribben. I am the community engagement manager within Volunteer Now. So it's my team along with Jamie that will be out and about with organisations, supporting them in relation to helping them get on to Be Collective, but also promote their volunteer opportunities, develop those roles, Gethin. So kind of key information for them today.
Charlotte
Perfect.
then. Yeah.
Hi guys, I'm Charlotte. I'm from the USPCA Northern Ireland. I'm fundraising and events officer, so it's just finding about a bit more and how to make, big help out on just volunteering and events go that bit extra further.
Great, finally. And is it Jill, Jay McBurney, do you want to come next?
It is Jill.
I thought it was.
I'm the I'm the volunteer coordinator for the USPCA. I work alongside Charlotte and here for exactly the same reasons as Charlotte as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Jill. That's great. So, Gethin, that's all of us.
Perfect. No, thanks everyone. That's really helpful for me to know. And we often come to these things just sort of wanting to, absorb and figure out what's most useful to us. And if that's you, that's fine. You don't have to have a specific reason for being here just yet. So the good news is I haven't prepared any big breakout groups or anything like that. I wasn't planning to make you work too hard. You can sit back and absorb if you want to. And then we'll go through section by section and we can stop for questions, clarifications, or just sort of, unpick what's most relevant to you, really. So if we're ready, I'll share my screen. I'll crack on. Andrew is here to sort of help me keep an eye on the chat a little bit as well. So if you have a thought as you go, but you don't kind of want to interject or interrupt at that particular point, put it in the chat and we'll use that to sort of wrap everything up and we'll come back to it sort of periodically. That would be great. So this is the moment where the technology either works or it doesn't. So I'm going to try and share my screen. So if you just bear with me a sec. So I'm one of these men that can't do two things at the same time. So I think that is probably the main screen share. And if I do this, yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up from Denise. Hopefully you can see normal slides and not, all of my notes. The double screen thing, we've all been doing it a few years now, but it's still raft with difficulties, isn't it? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. So I've called this using the Big Help Out to boost volunteer recruitment because it seemed the simplest way to get to the nub of the issue here. The Big Help Out is a campaign, and it's an unusual one really for the voluntary sector, I think, in that I think we fulfil a couple of different roles on this. So there is something of an ask that the Big Help Out has of us in the voluntary sector. The Big Help Out needs voluntary organisations to bring its volunteering opportunities to this campaign so that we can make them available to the public so that we can hopefully reach and find new volunteers. So there is a bit of an ask and it feels like that at times on the Big Help Out, but there is also a benefit to you as well. You are also customers of the campaign because clearly we want organisations like yours to benefit from the volunteers that hopefully we inspire and bring through. So this is an interesting one, I think. We're giving, but we're hoping to receive as well. It's more of a partnership than a campaign that we just support or just benefit from. So how I've set this up is in two parts, really, with a sort of comfort break in between. We've got about an hour and a half and we're about 10 minutes in now. So we've got plenty of time. In this first part, I'll give you what I hope is a useful sort of briefing on the Big Help Out, and we'll cover some of the bullet points that you can see here. What's it really trying to achieve? How does it work? How do all the elements fit together? What does success really look like? What should we expect from this? And then why should we get involved? We'll cover those sorts of things as well. What's the opportunity for us as organisations? So that's a brief guide to the structure, and I'll probably pause after each of them. But if you want to kind of come in the moment, raise a hand and we'll kind of get involved. And if you want to, park something for the end of that section, just put it in the chat. We'll do that. Then we'll have a bit of a break for 10 minutes or so, get a cup of tea or whatever you want to do. And then in the second part, similar length, probably about 35, 40 minutes or so, we'll talk in a bit more practical terms about what you could do. So there are different kinds of activities that the Big Help Out is encouraging us to consider. One of those activities is simply advertising our existing volunteer roles. And that's the main one, probably for us as we're concerned. But there are other kinds of things that you can do through the Big Help Out as well to try and help you reach a new audience or attract new people to your cause. And that's where some of the alignment with Volunteers Week comes in. You've probably picked up that Big Help Out sits in right at the end of Volunteers Week this year. So there's a way of using both campaigns for a variety of purposes, I think. Okay, if that sounds okay, and it probably has to, I'm afraid it's a bit late to change much of it now, but you can certainly guide me on the areas of focus that you're most interested in as we go. That's absolutely fine. So let's kick straight into it, and introduce the campaign kind of as it stands, really. So you've probably got a strong sense of what the context for this is already, really. And so as an overview of the campaign, what are we looking at? Why is it here? What's it seeking to achieve? Okay, so we know that millions of people got involved in volunteering during the pandemic. We saw, upsurges in types of volunteering in some areas, but generally, and I'm sure this is broadly true in Northern Ireland as well, across the country, across the UK, we've seen significant declines in volunteer numbers since, via the key info and data that we have to measure this stuff. So I'm mainly thinking about the Community Life Survey that the UK government runs on an annual basis. There's a little bit of that data kind of coming up later if you're unfamiliar with it. Don't worry if you are. So we're trying to address something of a systemic problem, I suppose, in volunteering, and you're probably experiencing versions of this yourself in terms of an increased difficulty in, I guess, finding and recruiting volunteers, maybe retaining them too. So the Big Help Out just tries to step into this space and provide something of an answer to it. So we're trying to do a couple of things. We're trying to firstly raise awareness of volunteering throughout the UK. So we're trying to reach people that might be open to volunteering or warm to volunteering, or maybe they've never thought about volunteering, but it's got that next generation of volunteers feel to it. We're trying to cut through to that sort of audience, I suppose, with this campaign, make them think about volunteering and getting involved in causes locally. So there's an awareness raising side to it, and then there's an opportunity provision side of it, which is where we come in, and that's what I was referring to when I'm saying that the campaign is asking us to put our volunteering opportunities excuse me, and perhaps some other things that we might do around Big Help Out into a sort of national shop window, so that there's lots of choice for people when they come and want to get involved in the campaign. And as I said, it's taking place unhelpfully soon, as Denise sort of intimated, really, towards the end of that first week in June, aligned with Volunteers Week, embedded within Volunteers Week this year. That's a bit of a change from last year. If you were following this last year, or if you got involved, you might remember that it was based around the time of the King's coronation in May, about a month before Volunteers Week or so. So two separate campaigns at different times, perhaps taking a bit of energy from each other. We're hoping this year that the alignment with Volunteers Week makes it a little bit more efficient for you all, if you are doing things around Volunteers Week anyway. And there are some nice ways that you can link your Volunteers Week activity with the kind of objectives that Big Help Out is trying to help us with. And I'll say a little bit more about that as we go. So that's the kind of overview, I suppose. I don't know if there are, I'm just having a very quick look at the chat to see if there's any kind of clarification questions that we wanted to hear. Oh, thanks, Denise. You've given us some context on levels in Northern Ireland, 28 down to 21. Yeah, that feels fairly familiar. And still a big want to volunteer in the NHS. So that's interesting, Paula. Okay, so there's still drivers out there for people. I think that sort of matches what we see or what we experience nationally, or the kind of things that we talk about over in England as well, actually. But let's move on and look at some of the other aspects of how the campaign works. Firstly, let's have a quick look at the governance behind it. You may be interested in sort of who's running this, and kind of where it comes from and who's driving it in different areas. There are three main organisations or networks that are behind the Big Help Out this year and driving it. NCVO is the one in the middle. That's where I come from, and that's where I come in. Largest membership charity in England, as you probably know. Volunteering is a really big part of what we do at NCVO. So it's a natural place to house the support package for the voluntary sector. That's why I'm here. We've been doing this for a couple of months now, so we've got quite a lot of resources already, and I'll share those with you towards the end, and you can take them away and use them as you like. The other two organisations here, firstly, let's do the Together Coalition first. I don't know if you're familiar with these people, they're a relatively new charity. They're a cross-sector coalition that's dedicated to building bridges between different communities, founded after the murder of Joe Cox MP back in 2016, I think that was. So trying to bring the country together through different ways, and they run a number of different campaigns across the year that are dedicated to that kind of premise. The Big Help Out is one. They run a thank you day in July as well, which is a little bit like Volunteers Week in that it encourages us to thank and recognise people that help out in their communities. I think it includes key workers and those kinds of audiences too. It's broader than just volunteers, but it has a sort of similar premise. But they're an interesting cross-sector coalition, a lot of private sector involvement, a lot of faith organisations involved in together as well. So do check them out if you're interested in that. There's a good newsletter that they circulate regularly. And then the shaping, sorry, and I should say that the Together Coalition are probably where the sort of the headquarters of the Big Help Out lives. Most of the campaign team are sort of based there. They're responsible for a lot of the media elements. I'll say more about this later on. And then the Shaping the Future with Volunteering group, if you're not familiar with them, they're a formally constituted organisation. They're a sort of informal coalition of just over 30 or so of the UK's biggest volunteer involving charities. So all national charities with big volunteering arms who came together, more or less around the time of COVID to see how they could collaborate better on volunteering. They realised they all had different or shared aspects of need around their volunteering programs that they could do better working together on. They very much sort of conceived this idea behind the Big Help Out. They were conscious that many of them had lost a lot of volunteers during or since COVID and needed to do something to inspire the next generation. And that's where a lot of this comes from. You will probably see quite a lot of Shaping the Future members involved in the media elements of the campaign. Let me show you who some of them are. I don't think anyone on the call today is from these organisations, although kind of correct me if I'm wrong. But these are the sort of core 30, I think. There's a couple more that have been added since this slide was put together. But if you're familiar with these organisations, then Rotary are on there, Garth. Yes, of course. Apologies. Then you may want to check them out locally with you and see if they've got any plans for Big Help Out this year. Chances are they will. There might be some inspiration for you in what they're doing. They might give you some good ideas. There may even be opportunities to work together or piggyback on anything that they might be doing around Big Help Out. So quite a nice first port of call if you're looking for inspiration or if you're looking for just an understanding based on what national charities might be doing.
Gethin, can I just say that we have had a number of meetings of that group in Northern Ireland with local representatives. Garth has been part of that, and so have USPCA because they're a partner with RSPCA. So we are planning for an event in Belfast, which Jane can talk to us about later on. I don't want to sort of ruin your flow, but we will have a chat about that kind of opportunity because there is a chance for organisations to get involved in that at a local level as well.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Denise. That's great. And Jane, brilliant. Like, why don't you kind of come in when you think the time is right or sort of put your hand up and maybe you can tell us a bit more about that event. I am doing some events stuff in part 2, if that helps, but if it feels more natural earlier on, by all means, put your hand up or perhaps yeah, yourself or Denise or Andrew could flag it with me. That'd be great. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so that's a little bit of background. What's the campaign seeking to achieve? Well, it's about 3 things this year, really. This is, I suppose, how the campaign looks at success from its own perspective. Firstly, it is seeking to achieve something at scale. Millions of people across the UK came out last year for the Big Help Out, and we're hoping for something similar. This is about reaching large proportions of the population. That's who we want to kind of cut through to and try and build legacy from what happened in 2023. So it is very ambitious in that sense. The second point about sustainability, I think, is probably more interesting and more relevant for us. When many of us first heard about the Big Help Out, I think it felt like it was a bit of an exercise in one-off volunteering. Why don't you come out on this one day or this one weekend to do something, in your community? And perhaps a fear or a concern that that's the end of it, that there wasn't sort of anything else behind it really. I think if we're careful and if we do our planning well, then there are good reasons to assume that longer term volunteers can come from these one-off experiences. That's what the Big Help Out is trying to do, trying to enable organisations to convert one-off volunteering into something more sustained and something more meaningful. So we'll talk today about kind of how that can work best. So there is an element of a moment in time here, certainly. The Big Help Out weekend is on that last weekend at the end of Volunteers Week in June. But that's a sort of focal point for campaign purposes. And the idea is very much that we're trying to reach new people or lapsed volunteers or individuals that might be open to volunteering but don't get involved very often, and give them a really good experience and use it as an opportunity to bring them into something else further down the line. So that's where the sustainability comes in. And that's an important point to bear in mind as we consider if you want to get involved in this and how much effort you want to put into it. The kind of way that I talk about it with organisations is that I don't think this is necessarily a silver bullet for new volunteers, but it is an opportunity for you to reach people that you might not otherwise reach. And we've got a big national campaign backing our ability to do that. So there's an opportunity here, but we need to bring something to that experience as well. It's probably not an automatically translating into lots of new volunteers. But I will share something of how well it's gone in 2023 in a moment with other organisations, so that you can get a sense as to what success looks like. So that's the sustainability point. And the third part here is that there are definitely elements of the campaign that are trying to target different communities this year, particularly communities that are underrepresented in volunteering, may not get involved as often as others, trying to increase diversity in our cohorts of volunteers too. If you have this objective anyway within your own organisation, then hopefully this is a really helpful campaign, because it'll be boosting your efforts in that area. There are different ways that the campaign is thinking about who is underrepresented, and I'll say a few things about that in a moment. But we are all perfectly welcome to bring our own approaches to that as well. If you've got ideas already about the kind of communities that you want to target, Big Help Out doesn't prescribe. You can use the campaign to pursue those. With that in mind, actually, let's say a few things about who we think we're trying to reach here. And I've hinted at this already. So apologies for a slightly depressing graph. And Denise's 28 to 21% sort of is a bit of a version of this. I mentioned the Community Life Survey earlier. It's the national UK's probably our best data set on this stuff. It goes back several years. You can see the chart here shows you levels of volunteering back to 2013. So there's about a decade's worth of data here. And we can see that over time, generally, we are in a little bit of a downward trend. There was a bit of a peak after London 2012, when, of course, volunteering was quite high in the public consciousness. There were lots of examples of volunteering out there. We probably saw a bit of a version of this during the COVID era, when mutual aid was at a bit of a peak, and lots of people were coming out either for the first time or for the first time in a while to support their communities differently. And you can see some peaks in the COVID era too, but generally we've been on a bit of a downward trend since then, and that's of course where the Big Help Out sort of steps in. I've included this graph only really to make the point that there are several different types of volunteering as we measure it. And sometimes it's easy to forget this. So many of you'll no doubt be familiar with this, but when we measure who volunteers, we look at whether they're doing it sort of formally or informally. Formally meaning with us, with organizations, with some structure, with some direction, under the auspices of a charity or a group or a community organization or something like that, formal volunteering. But of course, many people volunteer informally as well. They take it upon themselves. A lot of the mutual aid during COVID felt like this, acts of neighbourliness, quite autonomous, quite self-directed at a time at which it chooses them. And if we think about many of the challenges that we're experiencing in volunteer management and recruitment and retention at the moment, we're very much encouraged to think about flexibility, what we can give potential volunteers in terms of more freedom or more control over their roles, perhaps. So you can see how informal volunteering attracts, and that happens at different levels too. So we've got formal and informal, and then we've also got regular and irregular. Regular means something like once a month, we're coming out and doing something on a regular basis. Irregular, perhaps once a year or so. And these 4 lines cover that spectrum of possibilities in volunteering, essentially. Who's doing it formally, informally, regularly, or irregularly? And the one that we're probably all most interested in is this blue line at the bottom. That's the formal, regular volunteers. These are the people that we probably most depend on in our organizations, the ones that are coming out most regularly. That's who we all want more of, and that's perfectly fine and natural. And the campaign understands that, of course. But this graph reminds us that there are other types of volunteers out there, people who are interested in volunteering, just doing it in different ways. And actually, there's more of them. There are that we can literally see there are more people on the orange line and on the yellow line and on the green line. And Big Help Out is trying to reach these kinds of people, I think, really open to volunteering, warm to volunteering, may not be coming out on once a month basis, but given a clear opportunity, given a good experience, given a clear message and a call to action, perhaps we can encourage them to make a more regular and meaningful commitment. And that's part of the thinking behind this kind of campaign. Let's say a few quick things about different groups. He says, having a very quick look at the chat. No, nothing too crucial there at the moment. So I'll move on for now. I'm sure Denise and Andrew will tell me if anybody wants to sort of jump in at all. One of the slightly underrepresented audiences in volunteering that the campaign is trying to target this year is younger volunteers. Younger volunteers in the CLS data are a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. The 2 age groups that we think about are typically the 18 to 24s and then 25 to 34s. And if you look at volunteering by age in the CLS data, whether it's formal or informal, what we tend to see is that 25 to 34 age group is consistently the lowest, and that goes back across all of the recent data that we have across that last 10-year period. So we know 25 to 34 is that sort of just post-student or young adult age group. It's really, really challenging to engage in volunteering under any auspices. 18 to 24s are slightly different. They tend to sort of sit somewhere in the middle of our age groups. They're not particularly underrepresented or overrepresented. But when we look at what happened at Big Help Out last year, we actually saw that the younger age groups engaged particularly well. So there was a big chunk of people that came out and took part, just over 20%, as we can see here, that were in those 2 age groups combined, 18 to 34. And the graph on the right is a sort of follow-up exercise that our polling did with those with all age groups to say, what was your experience like? How likely are you to get involved last year? And you can see the 18 to 24s and the 25 to 34s are the biggest age groups that say, yes, I am likely to take part in Big Help Out again next year, this year. So we are trying to look at younger volunteers, I suppose, from a pretty obvious angle. They're the next generation. If we can inspire some civic habits now, perhaps that stands us in good stead for the long term. There's certainly an element of that to it. But also because the experience last year suggests that young people are particularly warm to a campaign like the Big Help Out. They seem to be amongst the most enthusiastic. So if younger volunteers is an objective for you, hopefully that's one reason to consider getting involved this year. If we sort of broaden the question out a little bit and think about, who is underrepresented in volunteering, the CLS data is actually quite mixed on this picture. And I don't know if you've ever looked into this yourselves, but if you've ever wondered to yourself, well, what do the trends in volunteering tell us about volunteers from different ethnic backgrounds or perhaps with a disability? They're quite mixed. If we look at sort of formal and informal and regular and irregular, you see quite a lot of those different demographics and protected characteristics looking quite well represented or quite badly represented, depending on kind of which graph you look at. So there are very few clear pictures that we kind of get from this. The only one where there does seem to be a really clear picture of who is underrepresented is the graph that you've got in front of you here. And this is levels of volunteering by areas of deprivation. And this probably won't come as any massive surprise to anyone on the call today. But what we're concluding here and what we see quite clearly from these lines is that those living in more deprived areas volunteer less. So we've got 1 to 5 in terms of levels of deprivation, in terms of how these things are measured here. And 1 is the lowest level of volunteering. That's the dark blue line that you can see at the bottom. And there's actually, clear daylight between these lines as we move up. So the more affluent areas that people live in, the higher levels of volunteering tend to be. So I say this probably for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because if you are thinking about targeting thanks Denise, that they're similar in Northern Ireland. That makes sense. If you're thinking about targeting areas or communities that are underrepresented in volunteering, but you're not sure where to start, then areas of deprivation or areas of lower economic and social capital are probably a really good place to do so. And that's no surprise to us, really, is it? These are areas that probably have less access to infrastructure in England, and I'm sure you'll have a view on this, on how this pans out in Northern Ireland as well. But in England, we see these areas typically without a volunteer centre or without much in the way of local voluntary sector infrastructure. So there are, structural and infrastructure barriers as well as other things. And the data in volunteering feels quite consistent with other comparable data sets. So there was a study done by New Philanthropy Capital in England just a few years ago, which looked at where charities were based and how many charities per capita you had in different types of areas. And they found something very similar. More charities exist in areas of higher affluence per capita per head. And then and just to reinforce the point further, a similar study was done when we looked at where mutual aid groups had been set up during COVID. You found more mutual aid groups in areas of greater affluence as well. So it does, and I said this is, feels intuitively fairly obvious, doesn't it? But we have quite a lot of data to suggest that volunteering is connected to economic affluence, economic capital, and social capital as well. So the campaign is trying to target some of the areas in England, particularly of higher deprivation or lower levels of voluntary sector or volunteering infrastructure. And I can say a little bit more about what they're doing, perhaps in part 2, because some of their events might be kind of interesting if you're looking for sort of inspiration. So we've done quite a lot of background now on what the campaign is and kind of how it and who it's trying to target. Let's have a think about kind of how it works and try and help you to understand the different elements of the campaign. There are 2 sort of different sort of interlocking elements of this campaign that work together to try and make it successful, really. A media campaign and a sort of digital user journey for the user, for the public, for the potential volunteer, if you like. So the media campaign element is the element that's really kind of coordinated by the Together team at headquarters there. It's a high-profile national campaign targeting print media, broadcast media, and social media, national and local. And its job really is to sort of, keep volunteering as high in the news and as high in the public consciousness as possible. So there's lots of TV opportunities, quite a lot of celebrity ambassadors involved. Many of the organizations in the Shaping the Future group actually are sort of contributing their media spokespeople or their celebrity ambassadors as part of this campaign. And that campaign is live now. There have been some quite high profile moments so far over in England. We've been on the One Show and quite a lot of breakfast news and those kinds of places. And what you'll see is that this will now build up to this moment in June, up to Volunteers Week, up to the Big Help Out weekend itself. And it'll be really kind of peaking around around Volunteers Week and Big Help Out weekend. So the idea is to try and drive the public to come and do something around that weekend as a clear call to action. Now, the Big Help Out we'll have that focus, and the media campaign will be doing things at particular times and building towards that moment in June. But the opportunity to try and attract volunteers can take place at any time up to the end of August. The campaign itself formally sort of runs until the end of the summer, and we'll talk about sort of, you know, how to advertise your opportunities online at the moment. But they will be live essentially in different places until the end of the summer. The June moment is the moment at which the public are probably most paying attention, and hopefully taking that opportunity to go and look for something that's right for them. But not everyone will be able to come and do something on Big Help Out weekend itself. So the campaign encourages us not just to run things on that weekend or to advertise opportunities that, you know, you have to sign up to on that weekend. They can be at any time across the summer. The June focus is just hopefully when we capture attention most. So there's the media campaign element, and then there's a digital user journey as well, which is pretty interesting. And this is happening in a couple of different ways. Essentially, you're in quite a fortunate place in Northern Ireland in that there's a lot of work going on right now behind the scenes to link your platform, your Be Collective platform, with the Big Help Out digital infrastructure that we're using across the UK. And this will help us in a number of ways, really. So there's work going on to integrate the two platforms, which means that you shouldn't need to worry too much about having to create different accounts on different platforms. You should be able to be publishing your opportunities into the Big Help Out space, into the digital space, if you like, from within your Be Collective activity. It's not quite available just now, and that's okay. The media campaign hasn't ramped up to a significant degree yet, so we've still got time to do this. And I suppose the digital message from today is to make sure that you've got everything that you might want to advertise within your Be Collective accounts. There is an opportunity to tag your opportunities on Be Collective as Big Help Out. There's a Big Help Out tag in there somewhere. Colleagues will come and say more or clarify elements of this as we go. But Jane's got her thumb up, so I think I've said it broadly right. But
You have. You've
maybe
said
we'll
it.
kind
You've
of
said it really right, Gethin. That's perfect. I couldn't have done it better myself. There is a tag,
Oh,
and
good.
it's really clear to see whenever you go onto the website, so people can see to search for a Big Help Out opportunity. But they can also, if you're in your opportunities and you go into edit your opportunity, it'll come up at the bottom of that first page to say, is this a Big Help Out opportunity? So that's perfect. It's really simple to do, and we are encouraging organisations to do that, so that if people do land on do it, that they'll come through to Be Collective and they'll see that Big Help Out tag. So it should all be like a circular journey for people, but a really easy one as well too. So that's
Perfect.
brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. No, that's great. This is a really key question for many of the groups that I've worked with in terms of how we link everyone's platforms together. There's nothing built around Big Help Out that is trying to be a permanent national platform for these things. There's, like I said, there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to connect everyone's platforms together so that the user finds the quickest, easiest way through to you. And that's the objective, really. We know that people are increasingly time poor and perhaps face barriers in other areas as well. We're competing for their attention, and the offer needs to be good, and the user journey needs to be good. So we're just looking for the most efficient and compatible ways to kind of get them to opportunities, essentially. So there's more information coming on what that integration looks like, but the goal is that you'll be able to manage a lot of your Big Help Out activity through your Be Collective accounts, essentially, and that should work. And Volunteer now will be updating you on that in due course, I'm sure. So if you're a member of the public, what does this look like? Well, hopefully what you're doing is you're becoming increasingly aware of this media campaign. You're thinking about volunteering and perhaps multiple times. And that's really essential in lots of our work, isn't it? I often speak to colleagues in fundraising who run campaigns, trying to get people to sort of sign up to different things or take part in activities or challenges, and they often talk about needing to sort of tell people 2 or 3 times before people are interested in doing something. I'm sure there's some research that sort of backs this up, but you'll probably have had experiences like this yourself. If a friend or a colleague is running a marathon or taking part in a challenge for charity, and we see this on our social media profiles, the first time we see it, we think, oh yes, that's good, I'll definitely sponsor them, and then we forget about it and we don't. And the second time we're sort of reminded and we see it again and we think, oh right, yes, I really must do that. And sometimes it can take 2 or 3 times before we actually kind of get round to doing it. So that's the thinking behind the sort of the media campaign. It's constant drip drip reminders, but hopefully people are driven to find out more and get involved, and the media activity will then be driving the public to a series of different places. So there is a Big Help Out national platform that we're using across quite a lot of England and bits of Scotland as well. But in Wales and in Northern Ireland, the message will probably be more around taking you towards Be Collective or taking you towards the other platform, and that works too. It's whatever we want the public to see, really. And that's where they will find opportunities. And by opportunities or by activities, we're talking about 3 things really. My bullet point here isn't quite complete, but we have more on this in the next section, in the second part of today. We're thinking about events, actions, and ongoing opportunities. So I'll just explain what these are now, because this is how the Big Help Out is describing the kinds of things that we're putting in front of the public to try and attract them in. Okay, so events, actions, ongoing opportunities, all types of Big Help Out activity, all things that you can consider running, advertising, getting involved in other people's perhaps as part of Big Help Out. The reason I suppose that we have these 3 different types of activities is to cater for different types of volunteers. So many volunteers, as we know, are driven by, a sense of duty or wanting to help out. Probably a lot of the volunteers on that dark blue line at the bottom, the regular, the formal volunteers, have that kind of persona about them. But other volunteers we know are driven by other things. Some of them are driven by opportunities for personal growth or development or career advancement, and that's the way in which they think about or access volunteering. And others might just be looking for some fun, a good experience, a social activity, quite light. Perhaps they're more customers of volunteering at this point in time. So we have different personas going on in volunteering. We're all increasingly aware of this. And events and actions and ongoing opportunities is trying to cater across that sort of spectrum. So events, and Denise referred to a couple of these that you might be hosting kind of collectively in Northern Ireland, but there's lots of those types of things kind of going on across the country, and many organizations are thinking about holding an event, probably a physical gathering, could be online as well. There are some online events that are being planned, but I think most people are thinking about them as physical things that people can come out to at a specific time, and using these as an opportunity to promote your volunteering offer or something else wider about your cause. So we've made a couple of suggestions here. A lot of people are thinking about running events as volunteers, taster sessions. So light touch opportunities to try out what volunteering might look like with you. Ideally, I suppose these need to be the kind of things that are quite easy to just turn up and take part at. Probably not the kind of activities that would require background checks or prior induction or elements of training or those sorts of things. So if there are versions of what you offer in volunteering that you could boil down into something that might be quick and easy to try, and you could build an event around that, that might be something to consider. Come down to our event. No obligation to stay, no obligation to come back, but hopefully you'll have a great time, and we'll give you an idea about what volunteering with us is like. Others are doing similar things, but perhaps more from an information provision opportunity. This might suit online opportunities more, essentially. And some individuals might prefer the opportunity to do something online than to come to something in person. Or there may be access barriers for them, which makes online a slightly more attractive option. but some national charities are using online events or an in-person event potentially to share more information about their cause or volunteering essentially. So perhaps fewer elements to try volunteering directly on the day, but perhaps to explore kind of what it might mean. I remember last year the Samaritans took elements of their onboarding and their induction training that they did with their new volunteers and sort of repurposed those or had light touch versions of those that people could come and try online. So you know, for people looking for that kind of volunteering role or commitment, they've probably got lots of questions about, you know, what it takes to be a Samaritan Hotline volunteer, what kind of commitment is needed, what level of training, how they might prepare themselves psychologically, those sorts of things. Samaritans sort of repurpose some of their early training to give people a flavour of that. So an event can be kind of anything like that, really, and lots of the infrastructure organisations in England that are getting involved are using it in broader ways just to sort of promote and showcase volunteering that takes place in their area. So volunteer fairs, you know, we're all familiar with those sorts of models. Those kind of things are kind of quite popular. People are also taking roadshow type approaches to this where it's not a, you know, a fair in one location. Perhaps they go out and target different communities or go and work with an anchor organisation in underrepresented communities to bring volunteering to those communities, essentially. But events can be sort of anything like that in that space, and the advantage is that you really take advantage of the media campaign here. There's a moment where hopefully people are paying attention. Oh yes, I'd love to go out and do something on that weekend. What could I do? I want to go to something. I want to have a good experience. That's where events come in. Actions are slightly different. I'm just keeping a quick eye on the time, because I'm probably going over a little bit. Small things that individuals can do at any time that really make a difference to you or your cause. So lots of charities think about this slightly less in a volunteering sense and maybe more in a kind of campaigning sense. So if you're running campaigns that require small things that individuals can do, perhaps online, but perhaps not, then an action is something that you can promote through the Big Help Out environment, really. So it could be as simple as signing a petition. It could be as simple as looking at or promoting your own social media activity. If there's something that you're trying to kind of raise awareness of, please come and sort of, you know, help us retweet this or promote this in a different way. It may involve finding out more about the cause, perhaps taking a survey, perhaps giving feedback. Some of the more advanced models of actions include elements of citizen science, where you might ask the public to go out and record something for you. The Campaign for Protection of the Rural Environment, CPRE, last year had a model like this, where they organised a sort of hedgerow count. It was app-based, and they asked the public to go and monitor and count the quality of hedgerows in their area and then feed that information back. So you can use actions for those sorts of things. I think they work quite well for online activity, and they might work particularly well for people who are time poor or want to do things at a time that suits them rather than an event which tends to be at a fixed point in time. So we've got events and actions alongside the obvious ongoing opportunities, your existing volunteering roles. This is the easy stuff, really, and we certainly want a lot of opportunities to volunteer or to consider roles in a formal sense as part of this offer to the public. And it's probably the easiest thing that we can all push into the ecosystem and promote, essentially. If you don't feel you quite have time to organise an event or organise an action, we can at least do that. Not everybody that comes to the Big Help Out might be quite ready for a committed volunteering role, but that's why we have events and actions too. But at a minimum, do by all means promote your ongoing opportunities, and there is an audience here. Okay, I think I've covered some of the timescale stuff in the right-hand side, but maybe we'll come back to that if people kind of have questions about it. Yeah, we're getting into the end of the first part now, so we're doing quite well for time, I think. So, a few quick words on how this relates to Volunteers Week. Hopefully, it's a really natural connection, really. So Volunteers Week is about celebration and recognition. You may well be doing things to celebrate and recognise your own volunteers anyway. The Big Help Out has more of a recruitment objective behind it. But because these things are happening at the same time, there's an opportunity to link them together. And that gives us a couple of advantages, really. Firstly, it's sort of more efficient. We're not having to think about two different campaigns at different times, and the resources that it takes to kind of go into those. And secondly, the recruitment objective gives you a really nice call to action with your Volunteers Week activity, we think. So, for example, if you are doing things to promote your existing volunteers or to thank them publicly during Volunteers Week, perhaps you're writing that up as case studies, perhaps you're putting out press material, perhaps you're even having an event with volunteers to sort of recognise and celebrate them. If you're putting that out into the public domain, if you're promoting it in the media or in social media, if you have an offer around Big Help Out, if you're also promoting an event, an action, or your own opportunities, then you've got a really nice call to action that you can wrap into your comms around Volunteers Week. So hopefully somebody sees that. They're really inspired by the examples of volunteering that are already happening with you. And they're thinking, well, how could I do that? Or I'd love a bit of that. Oh, what could I do? Well, here's a clear ask. Actually, I can go and take part in an event this weekend. I can go and find out more, literally this week. Or I can sign up to perhaps do something through an action, or I can have a look at these roles right now. So it gives us an opportunity to kind of connect these two together, which we hope is very, very helpful. As you probably clocked, there's been a slight calendar change in Volunteers Week this year. It's moving to the first working week in June rather than the first calendar week. So it's the 3rd to the 9th in total. And a lot of the Big Help Out media campaign will work sort of simultaneously with that. You'll see most of it happening during Volunteers Week itself. There's a new brand and a website for Volunteers Week, which you've probably picked up through other channels. It's been out a couple of weeks now, but it looks really, really lovely. You can see the star-based logo at the bottom here. There's all sorts of new assets. If you're looking to do something on Volunteers Week this year, it's a great year to get involved. It's 40 years old this year as well, so it's something of an anniversary for them. We'll start to wrap up this section with some thoughts on impact and kind of what happened on the Big Help Out last year, hopefully to sort of give you an idea of what you might expect. So I said at the top that we've all got different roles to play to sort of make this work, and it relies on contributions as much as the benefits that we take from the campaign in the voluntary sector. The media campaign's job is to try and create a new audience for us. And if we looked at what happened in 2023, we can probably assume that was fairly successful. Over 7 million people told us they came out and took part in something when they were surveyed about this. On the Big Help Out last year. Most of that is in volunteering. Something like 6.5 million was connected to volunteering opportunities, and the rest is sort of, participating in something fun, perhaps an event, perhaps an action, perhaps something similar. So big audience was created. 30% of Brits had heard about the Big Help Out, so we managed to kind of cut through in that sense. And you can see that the voluntary sector sort of stepped up here as well. 35,000 organisations advertised something, put something on, promoted an ongoing role, that sort of thing. So lots of really good stuff happened last year. And on the right-hand side here, we're thinking about some of the challenges that volunteers typically talk about when they're asked about, why they don't volunteer or why they don't volunteer more, and how Big Help Out tries to respond to those. So you'll probably have seen versions of this in surveys yourself, but volunteers might typically say things like, well, I didn't know I was needed. I didn't know there was a need for me. Well, that's why we have a media campaign to raise awareness of the value of volunteering and the benefits that it brings. I didn't know where to look. Volunteers often say, or potential volunteers often say, there's a number of different sites here. It's too confusing. I didn't know where to find something that was kind of right for me and that sort of thing. That's why we have a very clear call to action about where you go, whether that's Be Collective or something wider. But that's where the media campaign is something that you can personalize to your needs in Northern Ireland. But a simple, clear user journey, a single front door, essentially. And then potential volunteers often talk about, flexibility or preferences of cause and those sorts of things. I couldn't find anything that was quite right for what I wanted to do or the causes that I was interested in. That's why we need choice. That's why we need voluntary organisations at scale all coming together to put their offer in front of the public. That's kind of what we're trying to do here. So that was the sort of headline impact that was done through polling immediately after Big Help Out last year. But we also did some quick follow-up with organisations and volunteers 6 months later to see what had happened. Had this led to new volunteers? Had you noticed an uptake in your volunteering essentially, and questions around that? And voluntary organisations told us, and this is a fairly small sample size, so don't take this as gospel, but this is indicative, and some of this I think is fairly encouraging. 17% of the organisations that responded to us told us that yes, we have had new, regular, returning volunteers as a result of people that came to us through Big Help Out. And perhaps more encouragingly, within that, there was quite a lot of diversity compared to the types of volunteers that they normally see. So some green shoots perhaps here, or some positive indicators. And if we look at what volunteers said as well, we asked similar questions of volunteers. They were, if anything, a little bit more confident, or a little bit more bullish, or a little bit more encouraging in terms of how they responded to the Big Help Out. So 80% of the people that signed up to something, that responded to our survey, signed up to do something with a charity or a cause that they didn't previously have any affiliation with. So there was a new audience for that charity there, that they were confident of that. 40% of them had done no other volunteering in the past year. So we're not just attracting the usual suspects in volunteering, which was encouraging. About 70% of those who signed up for something then went on to take part in them. So there's a reasonably high element of conversion there in terms of at least taking part in something for the first time. And that's normal. You know, we know that there is attrition, and conversion is a challenge between an expression of interest and coming out and doing something. We said on the last slide that about 17% of organisations said, yes, we did have returning volunteers. Volunteers themselves were probably more confident about that figure. 34% of the volunteers that responded to us said, yes, I did go on and do something with the same organisation. So the truth is probably somewhere in between, we think, really. But a lot of these figures give me confidence that this was quite a good experience for many of the volunteers that took part. Even if they didn't go back to the same organisation, 53% did say, yes, I went on and I've done something else in volunteering since in the 6 months. And a high proportion said they'd take part again next year. Couple of learning points for voluntary organisations, really. Something about kind of communications, really. Some of the volunteers that responded to our survey told us that we haven't actually done the thing that we thought we were going to do yet. It hasn't quite taken place yet. So there's something about the experience that we put on for people that we need to keep on top of. This is 6 months further on, remember. And then, you know, about 20% or so said I didn't have the best experience at Big Help Out 23. We know that paying attention to experience is key, and we need to sort of pay attention to that. So a reminder to us, essentially, it's not a done deal. Okay, final slide on this last section. Really just sort of summarizes what we think and what we hope are the benefits of getting involved. The first one is the obvious one. We're trying to reach a potential new audience of volunteers. Hopefully, I've managed to give you some confidence that the media campaign can generate an audience for us here, and that audience is a new audience to a good degree. We've still got a job to do to try and convert that audience into something that works for us. But hopefully it's there, and that's the main reason that lots of organisations are looking to take part this year. If you also have a target about trying to increase diversity in your volunteering cohorts, this is a really good time to put some weight behind that, because there's a national campaign looking to do similar. Your peers around you will be looking to make similar contributions as well. So it's a chance to do that in good company, and hopefully with the resources of a national campaign behind you as well. And then thirdly and finally, if you're doing something in Volunteers Week anyway, hopefully this is an opportunity for added value rather than an extra thing that you kind of have to do. And I've said a couple of quick things about how maybe we try and link celebration and recognition with recruitment objectives, and how that can work and get amplified through the media campaign. These are the top 3 reasons that I think are for getting involved in the Big Help Out this year, but I'd love to know what you think as well. I'm probably terrible for time. What have we done? 11:30. Oh dear. It's going to be a quick break, I think, possibly, but that's okay. Most of the key information is in this half. Would anybody like to kind of come in at this point, or have a quick chat before we go for a break? You're welcome to sort of put thoughts or questions in the chat if you like, but otherwise, that's the end of part 1. having a quick look on the chat. I don't think there's
Yes, and
anything
I'm just
particularly kind of
wondering,
key here.
because of time, do you want to just do a quick
Mm.
5-minute break rather than a 10-minute break, just to try
Yeah,
and make sure that we kind of wrap up for people in time?
absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely. Okay, great. Well, should we do that now then? Quick comfort break. It's 11:30. If you will come back for 11:35. Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Gethin. Well
Hi,
done for being
Denise.
back on time. It's good the two of us are at it.
Absolutely flies by, doesn't it?
It does. Hello, Garth.
Yeah. Welcome back.
Hi, Denise.
Easy.
Yeah.
Hi. Speed tea break. That's what we need.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm just going to share my screen again, and I'm sure people are just coming back as we kind of get into that. So, oh, good. And then bear with me. Play for the current slide. Okay. So we're back. I think that probably looks fine. I can see quite a number of us back, so maybe I'll kind of crack on. This second half is a lot shorter actually, and I just had a quick look at the slides. I'm going to cut out anything that we might not need, but I will circulate the slides afterwards if you want to sort of review them at your leisure. I'll send them through to Denise and her team, and you can put them out as you wish. So in this second half, we're probably going to just do a little bit of a slightly deeper dive into some of the things that we talked about in the first part, and this is about helping you plan the kind of things that you might want to do around the Big Help Out, essentially, which range from quite a light touch promotion of your existing volunteering opportunities through to something a bit deeper, perhaps event or action based if you kind of want to. So we'll talk about these four things. I've got a quick slide on each of them, and there's probably plenty of opportunity for chat here, or perhaps Denise, if you and your team want to say anything else about what's going on in Northern Ireland and some of those events that you referred to earlier, like now would be a good time for some of that when we get onto those. So
Yes, I can do that for you, Gethin. On the 7th of June, we have an event with TCV. At they have a grey to green site on Kent Street in Belfast. So it's a site where they will will have open to the public to come in, and they can get involved in an actual volunteering opportunity. They can take stuff away with them, but then they can find out about other conservation volunteers opportunities as well. Beside them is an organisation called Playthink Brink, who are redeveloping the site beside them, slightly different objectives, but still all about that green space, sustainability, good food, all that different type of thing. But they're allowing us to utilise their site, so it means that we can open it up to other volunteer and involving organisations who want to put up an information stand, who want to showcase what they do, or make that interactive in some way. So it is about your event, your call to action, your showcasing what volunteering is all about, and what it looks like and how to get involved. So that should hopefully be a really exciting, really interesting event on the 7th. On the 8th in Enniskillen, it's the D-Day commemorations. And as part of those D-Day commemorations, they are opening up to volunteer and involving organisations who want to promote opportunities in that County Fermanagh or wider area. Mostly, I'd say Fermanagh people go to it, but people may travel in because there'll be planes and all kind of army D-Day memorabilia and things there as well too. So it should be a really exciting event, but that opportunity for volunteer involvement organisations to get involved is really welcome as well. And then on the Sunday we have there's an elite race for 5K 1 mile athletes in Northern Ireland in Belfast, and we are promoting it as a big help out activity so people can come along and be an event volunteer. And that's really ideal for those guys that you were talking about who just want to dip in and out of volunteering, because it will give them an idea of what other events are happening in Northern Ireland that they can get involved in, but also enable them to take part in something that's really special. And it's the first one in Belfast. So it is new and unique, and we're recruiting for that at the moment. So that's kind of our big help out opportunities. I know other organisations like National Trust, Scouts, and other organisations around the room are organising their own things that they're doing as well as us. But those are the kind of key three things that we're doing in Northern Ireland with that we shape in the future group of members that we have.
And I suppose just
thanks,
to say,
Jane.
if anybody else on the call is not already hooked in and wants to come and offer, opportunities on that 7th of June, then please get in touch with Jane directly. I think it's probably the best thing to do.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, I mean, that's a great range of activities you've got going on in terms of, I suppose, showpiece moments for what's happening in Northern Ireland. There's some volunteer fair type activity in there. It sounds like there's some, fun experience, participative stuff on the Saturday, and then, and really nice event volunteering opportunities and stewarding at the race on Sunday as well. So that's a great range. The slide that you can see here just reproduces a lot of what I was saying earlier, actually. If you're considering hosting your own event or thinking about something that you might run, here's some inspiration, or there might be some other activities that national charities are running, perhaps the Shaping the Future group as well, that you can kind of get involved with. So that's events. Actions is probably the one of the three categories that we can say is sort of less popular, but there's probably more activity going on around events or promoting ongoing roles. But if your organization's focus is as much around building awareness of your cause as it is around finding volunteers, then actions might be something to consider. So I'll just sort of recap here some of the things we said earlier. Really, these are small things that individuals can do at any time. So they suit the time poor or people that need a bit more flexibility rather than an event. Could be online. Many of them are, but they could be in person as well. That hedgerow count I mentioned earlier was an in-person opportunity. Definitely a strong element of flexibility here, as we were saying, and you can use this to link to your campaign objectives, which might be a pathway into volunteering further down the line. If you have a sense that individuals could benefit from buying into your cause in a small way before making a volunteering ask to them, then actions might be something to consider, particularly if they give you an opportunity to try and capture people's data. Ask them to sign up to something. Would you join our newsletter? Can we talk to you about, other opportunities in the future? This might be a gentle way of getting that kind of data that supports your volunteer recruitment campaigns in a more formal sense further down the line. You could kind of combine it with some of the elements of events that we were talking about in terms of sharing information on what volunteering looks like with you. It could be a learning opportunity for them. And then, yes, to do something en masse or to do something a bit more participative, thinking about citizen science, which is, people at scale doing small things that gather data for us that help your cause somehow. Lots of great examples of that kind of thing out there. But actions might be something to consider. Does anybody want to talk about actions at all? I can't see anything particularly in the chat, but if you did, then now would be a good time. If not, then we're probably concentrating mostly on this, putting your volunteering opportunities into something of a national shop window. They can be new roles, they can be existing roles. As I said before, not everybody coming to the Big Help Out is going to be, convinced about making a longer term commitment right now. But many do. We know that a really big proportion, that the vast majority of that 7.2 million that told us they came out and did something last year, did do something that they considered volunteering at least. And if you're looking to put your opportunities into the shop window, the main route will hopefully be through your Volunteer Now Be Connected account. That's what we're working on, and it should be up and running probably in the not too distant future. There's a number of platform connection areas of work that are going on behind the scenes, and Be Connected feels like it's one of the more advanced ones. So hopefully not too long to wait now, and that would mean that you wouldn't need to go to the trouble of creating your own Big Help Out account on the national platform there. Hopefully that will provide a nice, easy digital route, and then your job really is probably to link your media activity to the URL to the website that you want to promote this through Be Collective. If we have a very quick look, and we're quite close to the end now, on how the media campaign is working. I've said a few things about this, but just to sort of recap so that you go away here with the information that you need and a kind of consistent message. The media campaign is starting now. You will start to see things tagged and labeled with Big Help Out. If you want to sort of follow this stuff directly, because a lot of it is reactive to what the media is willing to cover, and a lot of that is arranged day to day. So the best way to kind of keep on top of what's happening in the media campaign is probably to go to the Big Help Out website and follow the social media accounts that are listed on the bottom there. So it's the bighelpout.org.uk. There are links coming up with this in, so don't feel you have to write it down now if you want. But they're on X, as it's called now, and Instagram and Facebook as well. And those are the main channels. And that's a really good place to just keep an eye on what's going on. If you see something that sort of matches your cause or feels like something you want to promote, you can recirculate that through your own accounts. You can drive people to your Be Collective platforms. And then hopefully the public that are picking up these bits of media will then get that message, get that call to action, and come and check out your opportunities. If you want to go a bit further, and I guess, oh, Jane, did you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, yes, it was just to say that we were hoping to launch in Northern Ireland the week beginning the 6th. Some delays maybe in terms of getting that celeb or getting the thing tied together in terms of media partners and stuff. But there will be an opportunity, hopefully, for us to gain some media traction in Northern Ireland. I'm just quite conscious that it's quite mainland based at the minute. So hopefully we'll get that in Northern Ireland. And then we are looking for stories from organisations. So if people want to share the story and then promote their Big Help Out event as part of that story, then we're more than happy to take those and get them out onto our socials as well.
And actually, just to
Wonderful.
follow up, we're particularly looking, because it's the 40th anniversary of Volunteers Week. So, and I'm thinking of you, Garth, actually, because I know a lot of Rotarians volunteer for a long time. We're looking for profile stories for people who volunteered for 40 years or more, just as a kind of little hook. So if you have any Rotarians, Garth, that you can think of who might be in that space, give us a wee shout. So thank you.
Wonderful. So it sounds like you guys at volunteering now have got some media activities planned and happening, and the more that we can do to support Volunteer Now to amplify that, the better. So Jane and Denise have just given you an outline of that. By all means, tell them about it. You can also tell the national campaign if you want. There's a partner pack that we have, and within that, there's a link to a form that you can complete, which gives you an opportunity to say, this is the event that we're running. And you would do that if you would welcome potential support from the media. So on a daily basis, the media campaign based together will be trying to pitch in volunteering opportunities and volunteering stories into the media, into national and local media, into broadcast media. They'll be particularly keen to have examples of that from Northern Ireland, and Volunteer Now will probably be helping with them. It sounds like you're all talking to each other. But if you are running something where you would welcome the media coming down, or you have somebody that might be prepared to speak on camera, you can tell the campaign directly about this through this short form. And you don't have to do all of those things. You might decide, yes, we're comfortable with the media coverage, but we don't have anybody to put up on camera. That's fine. There's ways to sort of personalize that as well. That will give the media people something that they can use when they're talking to BBC and other networks in Northern Ireland. Okay. But you don't have to do that. You can simply kind of piggyback on the comms that come out. And I think that's what I was talking about with regard to following the social media, really. See what's coming up in the news, see what's being promoted, use that kind of content yourself, and use it to amplify your own messages and send audiences to where you want them to go, whether that's your ongoing opportunities or something else kind of connected to your cause. We've got about 10 minutes to go. There will be time for kind of, a little bit of questions and answers if you want. So I'll just finish with 3 quick slides on resources that are available if you want to sort of take this away and consider it a bit further. The first is a resource pack that we've put together specifically for voluntary organisations. If you're on your laptop or desktop now and you've got your phone and you want to do QR codes, that's where it is. But we will send this through to you, and the full URL will be there. So don't worry if you're not kind of capturing it. But if you want a bit more of what you've heard today about how the campaign works and everything, there's a big FAQ section in there which answers some of the key questions around everything that you can think of, from timescales to who's behind it, to what the digital campaign can do or can't do for you, or those sorts of things. If you're looking for help around how we target different underrepresented communities, there's some national data in there, and also some research from NCVO's Time Well Spent series, which looks at particularly underrepresented communities and what appeals most to them in volunteering. If you're planning your approach and thinking, well, what works? How do I reach these people? What were their motivations? There's some guidance in there for you on that. If you are thinking about using the national digital platform, it'll tell you all about how that works as well. Although hopefully you won't need to kind of go down that road unless you want to. And then there's also a version of this slide deck, a slightly longer version of this slide deck that you can use internally if you want to, convince your colleagues that getting involved in this is a good idea. So that's the resource pack for voluntary organisations. There's a partner pack that the campaign has put out together. Itself, and that's the place where you get all of the media elements essentially. So if you're looking for a bit of copy that you can copy and paste for your own newsletters or emails, that's all in there. There's a bit more detailed information on the campaign timeline. There's quite a lot of social media assets, images, logos, and other things that I'm slightly too old to understand now, but they look quite good. You can use those sorts of things too in your social media campaign. And then some of those links that I mentioned, if you're organizing an event and you want to try and attract the media to it, then you can find all of that through there. So again, QR code, and we'll send you the full link, but there's a partner pack. Actually, before I get to that, I will also include in this version of the slides I sent you something on the schools pack as well. Forgive me, who was it? Was it you, Emma? You're very interested in schools governance and perhaps attracting school governors. There is a pack for schools that we can send to schools that you might be working with if you want, which encourages them to host their own Big Help Out Assembly, which is their contribution to raising awareness of volunteering amongst their pupils. If schools want to, there are options for things that they can do on their own premises on the Friday when they're in school, and the schools pack talks about those sorts of things if that's interesting. I know you're interested in attracting governors probably mainly, but if there's a pupil angle on that as well, then the schools pack might be worth checking out. And we'll open it up for anybody that wants to raise anything or make a comment or talk anything. But if you are looking to do something and you want some extra help with it, Denise and Jane and their team very much on board in Northern Ireland. And I'm here too. That's all that this slide says, really. I'm a resource that comes through NCVO, but is designed to serve the whole campaign across the whole of the UK. So if partners at Volunteering Now want a bit more help, or kind of somebody in the room when you're planning, or help to understand some of the technical elements of how Be Collective connects to the national digital infrastructure, that's the kind of thing that I can help with too. So it doesn't, if you want to talk further, essentially the offer is there. That's all we're saying, really. Otherwise, that's probably all that I have to get across essentially. To Denise, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say, or whether we want to open it up at all.
No, let's have a chat. Do you want to stop sharing, Gethin? It might be useful because then
Yeah.
people can see each other a bit better. And then, does anybody have any questions for Gethin, or anything you want to share about what your plans are, or just any general comments about Big Help Out or thoughts?
Stunned silence.
Is there a way to kind of, like you were mentioning all the different charities that have, I suppose, done it last year and that kind of thing, to have to be able to see what kind of things that they're offering, that kind of thing.
So just get ideas,
Yeah,
Kiwi,
yeah.
about the kind of thing. I mean, I know locally last year there was a number of different sort of things that people did. Organizations did like drop-in days, so people could come in and just get an idea about what their organization did and kind of get wee tasters. I know in Fermanagh last year there was like a volunteer fair idea that Jane attended, which was just for people to kind of come along and see the range of organizations and the kinds of opportunities that were available. Have you done these kinds of things before? What sorts of opportunities do you have in your organization?
I suppose it's very much community volunteer and kind of fundraising.
Right, okay.
So, but it was just kind of, to, I suppose, widen it out to try and see if there's different ways that, I could encourage more people in,
Yeah, I mean, you could do a stand at the Belfast event if you wanted to. That would be something that might be a quick do. Jane, I don't know whether you, because we're going to offer that out to, groups who just want to come along and promote their opportunities. So that might be an easy do for you.
Yeah, I think, Katie, I think for the likes of your volunteers, the fundraiser volunteers, or they're, coming in to help do activities, then it's maybe about that social media presence in terms of amplifying the work that your volunteers do, the impact that they have, and what they get out of it, and that run up to Big Help Out. But then also, you could do like an information session, you could have a drop in a particular area where if people want to come in, and if they don't come, then you've still done your promotion, in and around it, but it's giving people an opportunity um to have those conversations with you and to find out about what you do. I know you've got a good reach across the church network as well too. So maybe it's about having a contact number or putting something in through those church networks to say, these are the volunteers, this is how many volunteers it takes, this is how many it has, these are the gaps that we have, this is the impact we could have if we have more, and this is how to get in touch, or here's an information session, come and listen to some of our volunteers, and have it very volunteer focused. And I think something like that would work for the likes of you, because you do have such great impact, and maybe it's just about sharing it from that volunteer focus.
That's great.
Aside from volunteer fairs and volunteer roadshows, the only other kinds of events that I've heard a bit about in England so far have been quite a few areas of doing some sort of civic activity in a public place. There's quite a lot of litter picks and mass litter picks, that sort of thing, which is a fairly obvious model, but those kind of things have attractions in some ways. They're quite easy to explain to the public. They get what they are. So I think if you're looking for a place-based activity, there's something useful about that. Something that the public will intuitively understand and come and take part in.
Yeah.
They're doing one down in Medway in Kent. I was talking to them yesterday, and so they're doing a litter pick, and then they've got a sort of more participative fun element with a local artist who's helping them turn that litter into something art-based, and then I think they might donate those to local hospices or schools or whatever it might be. So they're trying to link people that will want to do something from a sense of duty with people who might just want an experience, and try and take them on a journey. I hate that phrase, but it's everywhere at the moment.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, and those opportunities, that kind of thing, Gavin, are great for families as well. So
Mm.
that's also quite a good message, because people like to do things with, as a group.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a lot of litter picks. Scouts did quite a lot of stuff last year. If they were close to a beach or close to an area that they could do litter picks in, some of them partnered up with the likes of the National Trust and did activities in the National Trust, just to raise awareness of Scouts and what they were doing, but also then helped National Trust in terms of their promotion of their volunteer opportunities. So there may be other partners out there that you could team up with that would work really well as well, in terms of making it easier, I think, too. I think it's really useful to have that until the end of August, Gavin, because I was kind of saying to organisations until the end of June, keep promoting it to the end of June, because it is the month of community. But I think if organisations know that it'll be there, and then we can keep the big help out tag on Be Collective until the end of August, then that can change the narrative a wee bit too, and releases some of that pressure to think that they have to do it at a weekend whenever maybe their volunteers aren't about.
Exactly. And if we're planning something ourselves on the call here today, then I suppose the message is that, you need that probably ready in terms of planning and on the site just before Volunteers Week at the latest. If you can get it up there sooner, that's great. The app is out now, and the comms are going out now, so people are starting to think about these things. So, we've only got a minute or so before we wrap up. So maybe it's a good time to sort of, think about what we can do next. It feels like the key thing that you can do is make sure that you have your current opportunities on your Be Collective account. Make sure that's up to date. Make sure you've tagged those with Big Help Out. That way, anybody seeing stuff now is finding you. That's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're minded to do an event or an action as well, then you've probably got until the end of May to sort of fully organise that and kind of get it promoted. And I wouldn't be too worried about that timescale, because I think that's when most of the public will start paying attention, during that first week of June. So if you're not ready now, you probably won't miss too many people. Okay. I'm happy to take other questions. People are very welcome to contact me directly if they kind of want to. If there's anything that you were hoping for from today that you didn't quite get, do please let me know. Chances are there are other voluntary organisations that probably want the same thing, so it was really useful for me to hear. Otherwise, I'm around. Get in touch if you want any help with anything, and you know, either directly or through Denise and Jane and their team as well. And thank you for being here, and I wish you all the best in your big help out planning. Let's hope it really makes a dent in your objectives for volunteer recruitment. That's the hope. That's the plan.
Gethin, thanks so much for taking the time to do this for us this morning. We appreciate it. So,
You're
and
very
thank you
welcome.
everybody for joining us. And Jane will send around the slide afterwards, and also we can put a link to the recording on the website as well. That's great.
Brilliant.
Thank you.